I am the theme song, Omatic 3000. I make the podcast theme song. Beep beep. You can react.
That machine is lovely.
Ah, well, thank you. It's my finest creation, I say. Alright, welcome, fellow nerds, to another episode of the Writ Wit, the show where we take a quick break that lasts 9 months, and yet somehow pregnancy is not involved.
Civil War was a doozy.
Wait, you're saying it was so good that we... Never mind. I'm gonna not go there. I'm Matt Donald.
And I'm Matt David.
And we're finally back.
Once again.
How are you doing?
I won't complain. It's been an interesting long time, and I'm excited to get back to this. So.
You're feeling a little sick, although I don't think it's because we're doing the podcast again, is it? Are you making an excuse?
No. You realize I'm recording, right?
Yeah, I guess. Well, you might stop us in the middle, you know. Alright. So, as usual, we like to start off with, what did we rip off of this week, aka what have we read? And by this week, we mean the last 9 months.
Pretty much.
We've watched a lot of stuff. We're going to rip off all of it, to be fair.
Sure, all of it.
Let's see. So I discovered this gem on Netflix. Unfortunately, it's not there anymore. I like these kind of movies just because of how ridiculous they are. It's this old 2003 movie.
Sold.
Movie called The Core. It has Aaron Eckhart before he was Two-Face, and it had what was her name? Hilary Swank.
Oh,
and
before $1 Million Baby.
Yes, I had to think about it for a second.
2003? Come on.
$1 Million Baby came out in 2004, I think.
All right, but still.
But anyways, it's so ridiculous and it's so corny. But the thing is, the reason why it works is because I think it was intentional. There's a scene at the beginning when he's describing all the terrible things that are going to happen to the Earth when the core stops, which is ridiculous on its own. And then when they say, how do we fix it? He's like, we can't. And he goes throughout every single reason on why they can't.
What's the whole point of the movie if you're
right,
going to say you
but
can't
all
fix
of the reasons he goes forward, he basically is explaining very thoroughly why the plot of the movie he's in will not work. And then someone says, yes, but what if we could? And then they proceed to use a magic element that they have that can make them drill to the core along with a magic laser.
Listeners, if you'd like to join in on this, I'm going to do an epic facepalm on counting down from 3. 3, 2, 1.
I did it with you. I'm such a nice guy.
Thanks for corroboration.
No problem. And I made it extra loud too. My head hurts.
Yeah, I know it's a little bit too.
All right, but no, it's really good because I think the thing is, a lot of people really don't like it. If you go into it realizing that it's in on the joke. It's almost like a satire of a disaster movie. I mean, the plot is basically inverse Armageddon.
Fair enough.
It's Armageddon, but down instead of up.
Yes, going into the Earth instead of into the sky.
And I think at one point at the beginning, when he's explaining why it won't work, this government guy's like, well, if we can go into space. Like, well, space is easy. It's empty. I'm like, yeah, the Armageddon was so easy. I think it's what they're going by. I loved it. I mean, it's not for everyone, but I loved it. It's a classic guilty pleasure.
One of those cult following
It did terribly, so I'm probably alone, but I think it's a great guilty pleasure.
Cult following, or guilty pleasure.
Cult of one.
Take your pick.
What are you planning on ripping off?
Well, I do happen to watch a lot of shows. Many of our American listeners, or perhaps other countries too, may be familiar with Power Rangers.
We're such an international phenomenon at this point.
Such an international. Well, I mean, if I'm normally recording from another country,
right? That's
but
true.
Anyway.
I forgot to bring this up in case there's a difference in audio quality. This is the first episode where we're both in the same room.
Hallelujah!
And
that's part of the reason it took 9 months.
Right, and not separated by 10,000 miles or whatever, which you had to rowboat your way here. That's why it took 9 months.
Rowboat, yes. My
How'd you do that, by the way?
My arms are still tired, if you have to ask.
But How'd you do that? All right, so go on.
So, I grew up a Power Rangers fan, and I found out somewhere along the line that it's actually based on a Japanese concept called tokusatsu. Tokusatsu, special filming. You can look it up. And I spend a decent amount of my free time watching these shows or reading about these things that go on because I like the idea that regular people can become superheroes.
Right.
And there's one show in particular that I've been watching lately, more recently than 9 months ago, but there's this plot line in which a character has this kind of wavering allegiance throughout the show and trying to find... Well, not all of them, but trying to find the best way to work this character from an enemy and into an ally and perhaps back into an enemy. You know, those kind of things.
Face heel, face turn.
Sure, if you want to use the name of that cliche, whatever the
face heel,
but
face
anyway...
turn.
Essentially, it's trying to find a way to do that because, you know, if you have characters whose allegiances have to change for some reason, it's a really good experience for your other stories later. So that's the thing that I'm going to try and rip off from that I've discovered in the last 9 months that had nothing to do with pregnancy.
Right, of course. You know what I think people appreciate about the show? We're super honest. We like this. We're going to rip it off.
Pretty much.
I mean, like we say,
what it is.
Everything is a rip-off of something else. That's why we call it this.
There's no such thing as a new idea. You just combine different elements together in a strange way that we've hardly seen before.
Hey, good segue, because I think what we're going to talk about now is what we at the Writ Wit have writ.
We at the Writ Wit have writ since last time.
Thank you. I'm more of a writer, you're more of a speaker and a writer.
So what have you done since we last convened for one of these episodes?
Well, you talking about merging or like taking old ideas and putting them together into something new. Last episode I talked about my book Megazoic and I was in the climax. Well, it's been 9 months and I'm still in the climax. It's taking so long. No, I'm just kidding. I finished it. It's been fully edited by both my parents and some professional editors, and my son. I'm trying to sound more professional. My parents are kind of professional.
Your parents are professional, but they're not in editing. But anyway.
Yes, they're professional, editor and editors. And now I'm working with someone to get some artwork done for it, because since I like to use a lot of obscure dinosaurs, I want people to be able to visualize them somewhat. So I'm going to do a bit like what the Harry Potter books do, and have like a little image at the top of each chapter.
Plus the cover image, too.
Right, exactly, which I already have designed.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to that. I'm gonna put a website up. We'll help advertise it. We're going to put this up.
Yes, we're actually going to put this on the website so we can actually increase our listener audience.
It's from 3 now to 3 million. I'm calling it in
1 week. 1 week.
By the time the next episode comes about, we'll get tweets up the wazoo. When's the next episode coming?
We're going to have to actually create a Twitter account. Anyway,
I have a Twitter account. I just never use it. I better get on that.
So, have you read anything else since last time
yeah,
you want to tell us about?
I've written on the sequel. I can't really get into specifics here because...
Oh, of course.
But,
confidential information.
Let me clarify. I haven't written the whole sequel. I'm about 10 pages into it.
Well, I mean, that Climax took you forever to write.
Right.
Even if it didn't take 9 months.
It took 8 months, you're right.
It took 8
No, it took, I think I finished it that month.
But the denouement happens really fast. We'll get to that later.
We will get to that.
Anyway, as far as...
yes, what have you written?
Yes, I want to talk a little bit. There's a contest that I do just about every year. It's called National Novel Writers Month, NaNoWriMo for short, or I call it NaNoWriMo. It rolls easier off the tongue.
Yep.
And this last year, because it has been that long, 2016, I managed to create not 1, but 2 different stories and get them up to 50,000 words in the 1 month of November. Now, I will say, and we'll talk more about Nano because it dovetails with what we're talking about today nicely, but I just want to say that it's not my best quality work. However, it is an idea that is now on paper that was not before, and that is the purpose.
Yeah, NaNoWriMo, or NaNoWriMo, just Nano, it's never about quality. It is entirely about quantity, and that doesn't sound like it should be important, but it is. Like, sometimes you need to let go of your crap filter and be like, I just need to get this down. I can edit it to not be crap later. So, like, I'm terrible at Nano, and we'll bring this up in this podcast.
We'll bring this up. Actually, I think we're about ready to start. If that's okay with you, let's segue into the actual. The topic we're talking about today is going to be a challenge for a lot of writers, and that is both starting a book, but more importantly, continuing the book. Persisting through that first, like, am I sure what I want to do? God, that beginning scene is terrible, that kind of stuff. So with that in mind, I've got a couple of things to talk about from Nano. We can call them David's nano-tipperoonies, if you will.
Brilliant. Let's call the Websfording...
Let's call a spade a spade.
Webster and Oxford. Not Websford. Let's call the Websford dictionary and make Websford a word and also make tipperoonies a word.
We'll call a spade a spade. It's a clever name. Yeah, I won't claim credit for that. But anyway.
Yeah, the hardest thing for writers is definitely not only starting a book and continuing a book. Like, believe it or not, we're not experts, and we're not really professionals.
But we are better than you.
Yes, and here's the thing, I'm going to bring this up, though. Technically, since we have both started books and finished books, we're probably ahead of 70% of all people on Earth who have ever said, I want to be a writer.
That is true.
Although always
I think
difficult.
only one of us can actually receive credit for finishing a book. But that's beyond the point.
Yes. I wanted to be humble for a bit, but bow before me, please.
Humble brag.
Bow before me.
So Donald is asking for his legions of followers to bow here. You can do that on your own, listeners. But let's talk about how do you want to start a book. So here's the thing. You obviously need some initial idea,
and right? Yes, and that's always the easiest part, like, at least for me.
I think it's one of the easiest things, too. Of course, our imaginations tend to work on, like, hyperdrive.
Right.
And so we constantly come up with new things and trying to tweak old things and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Obviously, in one of our last episode, I mentioned I do a lot of fan fiction that's tweaking ideas that already exist, using things that are already out there. So here's the brilliant question.
Ooh, brilliant questions. I like those.
How much do you plan?
Well, of course you have to start with the initial concept, and that, again, like I said, that's the easy part. I have this thing called the back burner, where I have, like,
pretty much everything.
Not exaggerating, I have dozens upon dozens, maybe even over 100 ideas. Most of them will never become books. But you need to figure out, when you have this idea, what to do with it, and how to start it.
Sure.
Because sometimes what's interesting about your story doesn't happen until the middle.
And for what it's worth, this is two separate approaches, and one of them may work for you or not. But I'm pretty sure I speak for myself only when I say that I tend to get things down on a document, have them there. Maybe I don't do much planning, but I have a basic skeleton about my characters, about some of the biggest hits of the plot, because that way I can work from there. Because unfortunately, I end up abandoning these ideas for quite some time. That's that bad habit. Now, I think that Donald has a different approach that he should also tell you about.
Absolutely. My approach, it doesn't work for hardly anyone. It barely works for me. My idea, for most things, is don't write them down, because if they're good, you'll remember them. And this is, I'll admit, this is a terrible way to be. There's a lot of ideas that I probably could have saved, and I didn't. And also, there are specifics. If I need to remember specifics, I usually forget those, even if I remember the initial idea. So I do like you do. I write a document.
Playing devil's advocate, though, the thing about the ideas that stick, you know, those are the ones that are best. The ones that you continually tweak. They're not necessarily going away, right? So that part I really do like. Now, here are a couple of things that I've come up with from Nano, and these are the actual nano-tipperoonies. Now, here we go.
Nano-tipperoonie number 1.
You decide if you plot or fly by the seat of your pants.
Absolutely. Like, flying by the seat of the pants definitely works for something like Nano. In my experience, it can work, and it's really good about getting the book down. However, it does run the risk of making your plot a mess.
Absolutely.
Like, my book, Megazoic, is like the 400th version or so.
Something like that.
And one of my versions I had it about 10 years ago. I'm so old! But it was a fantasy version. It was in this fantasy world. And I did it to help myself be more creative. Like, it allowed a lot more creativity than it is right now. And I do like it right now. I think it's better right now. I think it makes it more focused. But back then, when I was like it was in high school. I mean, homeschool, but high school. And it allowed so much creativity, and I could just allow it to pour through. So often what I did is I had a plan for the beginning, I had a plan for the end, and then I wrote whatever the hell I wanted in the middle. And the problem with that, there was a lot of filler.
Sure.
Some of that filler did lead to me building off of some of those ideas to become very plot important later. But like, this new version of my story is much, much more focused. Like,
tightly plotted.
Yeah, every scene has a purpose in the overall plot.
So
at least I
it's
think.
kind of, to compare it to TV shows, you see a lot of like different writers in the chair, and so sometimes they'll throw out this great idea, but then they just kind of abandon it. That's kind of the filler thing that you're talking about. Now, here's number
Lost.
2, Tipperary. Well, sure, that's a great example. It's kind of like the prototype. But here's number 2, Tipperary. It says, come up with a concept that allows a lot of flexibility.
Like my fantasy version.
Like his fantasy version where he took it and did his own thing. Now, keep in mind that these are my two Nano stories. One of them was as an athlete in high school who was writing a diary. Literally, when do you end a diary? So, like,
Never.
there was no...
Whenever you get bored.
I mean, there was an arbitrary end and beginning point. Anything else was fair game, and that allowed me a lot of chance to explore the world around him and talk about his friends and stuff like that. And I did take advantage of that. But
the problem with diaries, though, is especially like diaries in the real world, as in writing about diaries, is that here's what happens. Dear diary, someone got me this gift for you. I love writing in this diary. I'll see you tomorrow. And the rest of the book is just blank.
It's true, though. It really is. But those are a couple of tipperoonies from Nano and my experiences for the initial idea phase. So once you get that idea at least somewhat figured out, whether you're flying by the seat of your pants or whether you have like a tightly plotted opening sequence, we have to move from just conceiving to actually creating, and that is getting the words out. And I think that that's probably the hard part for a lot of us.
Definitely what I have to do is I have to write something that excites me. Not just the whole book, but like a specific scene. If I don't know where to go a specific scene, I need to think about how can I make this fun for me to write? Because here's the thing about writing, even for us writers, it's not always fun. Write what excites you. That's what I meant to say.
Sure.
Yeah. So if you get caught in some sort of writer's block, and not necessarily at the middle, which we will get to, but at the end, or no, not the end, the beginning. You just have to figure out, what can I do to make this story fun to write for me right away? Like, how do I make this exciting for me right away? Like, I like to open up with an action sequence. Especially, that works better if it's a sequel, though. Like, if you already know the characters.
Sure.
And you can already throw them in the thick of the action.
Right. I mean, getting the words out, obviously you have to start... Well, do you want to start at the beginning or do you want to start in the middle? Obviously, there's the thing called in medias res. We'll talk about that again. But do you start in the middle of some action sequence, like Donald said, or do you start like typical hero's journey? You have to set up the world and you have to establish the character and tell
he's
us
from
about
lowly
the
beginnings.
And he's probably a dishwasher in some horrible restaurant, and he finally ascends to becoming. You know, I mean, but you know,
a moisture farmer.
A moisture farmer.
That's what Luke was.
Oh, okay. That
does
right.
sound. You know, if you think about Star Wars for even a little bit, without your bias of it's Star Wars, it's kind of ridiculous.
Well, okay, that's another podcast. They have plenty of podcasts about Star Wars, but anyways, so. Where do I start with all my plans? I don't even know.
And it can be difficult. Like, you have to establish, even if not the whole thing, but the very beginning, what's going on, aka what's the plot, who are these people and who gives a crap, aka the characters, and where the hell are we, aka the setting.
Even if you're in Middletown, USA, you know, it's one of those things that we have to at least acknowledge that where we are.
Like, yeah, even if it's not in a fantasy world, is it in the suburbs? Is it in the country? Is it in a big city? Even if you're not even specific which city it is, it's good to get a good general feel of the setting, because even the real world is a pretty fast place. It'll have varied landscapes.
Different environments, different cultures. And so you need to make sure that your reader is clued into those kind of things. Of course, you also have to have a conflict, because obviously if there were no conflict, the story's not happening. Now, is it a conflict that you can reveal at the very beginning, or does that only come out later?
You need to figure out some sort of hook, though, because one thing that is a big thing about writing, here's the difference between books in terms of, instead of movies, people can put them down whenever they want. You gotta hook them in those first 5 pages. So, the best way to do that is to have some sort of hook at the beginning. Not necessarily a big one, but just enough of one.
Which is why you suggest opening with an action sequence, right?
Right, or even just a good opening line. Like, one of the opening lines for one of my books, I won't go into specifics, is basically, there was once a planet named blah blah blah, and it was currently being bombarded into smithereens. That was the opening line.
And that would get people's attention
pretty
fast.
What is this planet? Why is it being bombarded into smithereens? Who is bombarding it?
Exactly. You have like 4 or 5 things that you want to know, and so you keep reading to find that out.
And here's the thing as well. Often, whatever character you start with, readers generally assume that's the main one. It's not always the case, but that's usually what people think.
I can think of a couple authors who have done things where they'll introduce a character, but like later in the chapter they'll kill him off. Now, it's not always chapter 1,
Right.
but speaking of, being in the middle and stuff, I got one tip before I hopefully move on. My tip is, in medias res is your friend, obviously. Middle of the action. You don't need to info dump us at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's this gigantic Tolkien-esque fantasy world, you don't need to info dump all of it at the beginning. Right?
Absolutely not. Like, one of my biggest criticisms I have for some of my older work is this is too much info dumping. There's too much going on here. Like, we don't even care about these characters yet or what they're going for. We're not going to care about the specifics of the world.
Right. So you establish those things when you need to, once you continue the book. So let's continue our podcast.
Maybe. I'm trying to think, is there anything, if we said everything, it's not forced enough, because I'm trying to think if there's anything else we should begin. We should continue to talk about with beginning a book.
Is there a reason for us to leave the beginning of the book to talk until the...
Okay, I've got a tip. So this was brought up, so I was thinking about this with my opening line, and other big openings too, not just for like books or movies or whatever. One way to have one thing that makes a good hook is to give you stakes immediately, and sometimes that can be done more subtly than you might think. Like my opening line, this planet called blah blah blah. There was one planet called blah blah blah, and it was currently been bombarded into smithereens. The way it is written, you sympathize for the planet blah 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 because it's the one that's introduced first, and it's the one that's being victimized right now. Just from that opening line, you know that the people bombarding the planet are the bad guys, and there's a lot of subtle ways you can do this to like get people hooked in immediately, even if it's a crazy world. Like the opening shot of Star Wars is a really good example of this. You see this teeny tiny ship, and you see this gigantic ship chasing it. That's iconic for a reason. Right. We already are rooting for that little bitty ship because people root for the underdog. And we recognize that big one is the bad guy, even though no one has said it yet. Even though the opening crawl did say the Empire and blah, blah, blah. We don't know which one's which yet, but we can figure it out.
Yeah. Context clues are amazing. Obviously, with visual media, it's kind of easier to do that and to offset those things. But in written media, you have to find a very strong word choice. You have to find a very...
Like I said, though, the first one you do is usually the one people root for, and then, like... So that's why... I'm not bragging too much about this opening line. I'm just kind of proud of it. But... By the way, it's a story that's never going to get published. I'm sorry. I might reuse that opening line, though. I'm a big fan of recycling.
Oh, well recycling.
Recycling as long as no one has seen the original thing.
Recycling is good for your environment, children.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Captain Planet.
By your powers combined, we're going to talk about books.
Ugh, I think I might sell my Prius now and get like a big gas-guzzling Hummer just because you're angering me so much. No, I'm very green, guys. Don't worry. I'm all about
Sure, so green. That's why he recycles story ideas, because he's so green.
It saves paper, too.
You're right, it does. Well, that's why he types everything out instead of writing it on
Yes, I have a
paper.
typewriter. I really should get rid of that typewriter.
Yeah, the keys are starting to stick, man.
And I'm wasting so much paper. What am I doing?
Yeah, because you can't do any deletes at all. You people who have used a typewriter ever know this.
God, it's hard.
Are we done with the beginning stuff?
Wait a minute. No, there's like... I got a list here of like 12 other things. No, let's continue. Let's continue with continuing.
Alright, so now you get to do the forced segue. So... Obviously, for a lot of us, we'll have a pretty good head of steam built up, and we'll get to a point, and it's just like, what do I do? It's called writer's block, and it is like the worst enemy of writers everywhere.
And everyone gets it. If you don't get it, if you say you don't get it, you're lying. You do get it, or you're lying, or
you're lying,
or you've sold your soul to Satan. In exchange for eternal damnation, you will never have writer's block. In which case, how do I get in on that?
Well, if you want eternal damnation. But anyway...
What if I'm atheist? Well, no, I won't be anymore if I see that Satan exists and he's selling his soul.
You sold your soul to the devil? No.
I mean, sometimes what's life? You only live once, right? But then you only have one afterlife, too. Never mind. I shouldn't... Continuing
Be careful
books.
what you wish for. We're having writer's block on this episode, obviously, and so with writer's block, you have a couple different ways to approach it. And one of the things that I always think of when it comes to like getting through writer's block is just keep writing. However, sometimes that doesn't work.
Even it's a chore to do that. Like, to force yourself to write. Sometimes you need that. And here's the thing about all these tips. This is what works for us. Every writer is different. Every writer works differently. Sometimes I personally don't like writing on the seat of my pants. I like planning everything up. I know a lot of writers who work a lot better writing by the seat of their pants. So,
and define how much you have plotted out, because your plans, based on what I've seen, and I'm not giving specifics either. Based on what I've seen, they're more kind of a loose framework that you can work to, but it's not like
that's pretty much
truth.
exactly it. Like, I've got a loose framework. That's a good way to word it. And then sometimes I have certain ideas that I want, but I'm not sure how to make them all work out, and I can actually incorporate them.
Right, and
we'll make them all fit together.
I believe we will talk a little bit more about that, but for right now, let's each give a big tip, like the number one tip to somebody who's
tipperoonies.
Writer's block. Go.
For me, what works, not all the time, but a lot of the time, is ending your writing with an incomplete sentence.
So, like the session that you're sitting at?
Yes, basically. So there's no period. It's in the middle of an incomplete thought. It's hard for me to stop at that point because, like, I want to finish it. I'm so OCD.
Sure.
But it helps because then when you go back to it, you're like, oh, wait, that's an unfinished sentence. And if you're OCD like me, you'll want to finish it. And if you want to finish it, then you'll get back in the swing of it. Like,
and to be fair, remember that we said this is a personal thing, because I think if it were me, like, if I did something like that, I would still leave, like, notes in the margins or whatever to say, oh, I wanted to go here.
And then you'll keep
and
writing.
then I would just
and
keep
then you
going
automatically
anyway.
cure your writer's block.
But anyway, it's one of those things that, remember we talked about ideas that kind of go away or they stick in your head. And obviously if you have an incomplete sentence, you really hope you resume the thread that you lost, but sometimes it doesn't work. Now, here's one that I've taken from, this one's also from Nano, but I just really like this suggestion, so I'm kind of co-opting it. And that is, if you're stuck, literally throw in plot ninjas. And if you've never heard of this before, it's just drop a ninja in and see what happens, because all hell breaks loose, and it's awesome. Now,
the only time this doesn't work if your whole story is about ninjas.
That's true.
I mean, I guess it could still work. It's like,
well,
who sent these ninjas?
Who said it was just those ninjas? There's 3 different factions. But anyway, if you drop ninjas in and let something happen, it'll give you something. Now, I want to point this out right away, and I'll get to editing stuff later. You don't have to keep it.
Right.
Literally dropping in ninjas is simply a device to get you writing again, to get you past writer's block. And it's not necessarily going to stick in your story. Obviously, ninjas don't fit the tone of your story because you were stupid and you used samurai or something.
Or pirates.
Or pirates.
Oh.
Or robots.
That would actually, or just anything.
Anything besides ninjas. But anyways.
Dwarf ninjas.
It's one of those things
Law
that
ninjas.
if you keep the scene, then it has to work with the book. So if you drop it, fine, drop it, but it's going to get you out of your rut.
And also, one thing to point out in case it's not obvious, it doesn't have to be literally ninjas.
No.
I actually have an example of this in Megazoic, and this ended up really turning the tide of the story for me. In chapter 3, I think I can say this because the book is done.
You
and
can't
it's going to be out
edit it
there
anymore. Yeah.
It's going to be it's going to be out there fairly soon. I'm aiming for March, so by the time this episode probably is finished, and the next one is in the planning stages at the very earliest.
Recorded, yeah.
But so in the third book, the city's being attacked. In the third chapter.
That's a really big book for one book. You've got 3
9
books
months,
within it.
I've had 9 months to write all this. But anyways, in the third chapter, this city is being attacked, and this one character is fighting. This other character is helping her, and I was thinking about it. I was like, is it really just these 2 characters who are here? And then I came up with the idea of introducing these side characters. In the book, they're the Psy Squad. And I was like, what if we brought up this squad that are really incompetent, and they make this battle a heck of a lot harder. I never thought of it before until writing that chapter, but I was like, oh, this is some new characters, because I didn't really have a lot of new main characters stretch out. But because I put those in, it really set where the story was going to go.
It transformed the entire
because I had the basic plot there, but suddenly I had characters to help other characters. I had a big arc for some other characters that weren't the main characters.
And this is ninjas putting in plot in anything is the epitome of flying by the seat of your pants. Is it not?
Yes, it is. It is definitely.
And so,
and like I said, it doesn't usually work
with your loose framework too.
Right.
It allowed you. Your framework allowed you enough room to put that in the latitude to keep them and adapt what you did.
Right. Because my plan for the whole book remained pretty much the same. There was a few changes, of course, but adding the Psy Squad in really helped.
Some more tipperoonies from Nano that I've considered with writer's block, and this is more for just writing in general, but definitely keep these in mind from their own advice. And this one says, turn off internet and your other distractions.
I can build off on this. Write somewhere, in terms of my case, that isn't my hardcore gaming rig, where I get distracted and I play video games.
Because if you want to write, you've got to get yourself in the mood to write, and you don't want to have other things popping in like email and Facebook messages and stuff that you left unanswered. Just set aside a time. If it means enough to you, you'll do it.
Right, and like for me, like if I write on this computer, the one we're recording on right now, and I write for a little bit, I'll be like, oh, this is, I'm bored of it already. I'm gonna go play Overwatch. But
and thus he loses all of the time.
Right, exactly. If I go to a place with my crappy little laptop that's like 12 inches and has no graphics card or anything like that at all, and cannot, I don't even know if it can play Roller Coaster Tycoon. Surely it can play Roller Coaster Tycoon. That is an old
Let's
game.
not try it. But anyway.
But I'm not putting it on there because like I go to Starbucks or some other place and then I get to sit down and I write. And it forces me to write. Like, if I'm like,
Sure.
oh, I'm bored, I'm like, well, I'm already here. Let's keep going.
And hey, coffee shops are prevalent enough that it doesn't even have to be Starbucks if you don't happen to have one of those.
It doesn't even have to be a coffee shop. It just be
it doesn't.
anywhere. It could be downstairs.
A hardware store?
Yeah, sure, why not? They have a break room. Just sneak in there.
I don't know about that. But anyways, another tip. Turn off your crap filter. Essentially, you're not going to have a perfect draft the first time. We know this.
Mm-hmm.
Editing does exist for a reason. Don't worry about editing it while you're writing.
A good tip is to always treat your first draft as something that only you will read. It's difficult, especially for me.
Especially for somebody who doesn't make many drafts.
Right. Well, I don't rewrite entire scenes. What I do is
You rewrite entire books instead.
You guys can't see it. You guys can't see it, but I've got a certain finger up. Actually, no, I don't. But I'm not that mean, or do I? I mean, that's the nice thing about audio.
Yeah,
leave it
you
up to your
can't see
imagination.
it.
I could
You
be
can't
mooning
see it.
him for all I care.
Well, if that full moon doesn't get any less bright. But anyway.
Oh my god. All right,
But
moving on.
He does rewrite whole books instead of just little scenes.
But what I'm saying is that with my book that I'm planning, that I think is going to be the final one,
You say that now.
I edit these little, I reword certain things and other stuff, and that ends up going into it organically becomes a new draft. I know I could never, except I just said that, I could never rewrite, whenever I rewrite a new book, it's because I have a brand new idea for it, a brand new concept.
It's not
the
idea.
same plot, it's not the same, I mean, it is sometimes the same characters, but it's not the same feel, it's not the same tone,
It exists to show that you've gotten better.
Right, exactly. So.
Right. Well, here's another tip from Nano. Write every day and mean it. Now, what I mean by that is not, oh, I have to write one word, so I'll type blah and call it good. Do something. Whether it's plot ninjas to get yourself off a writer's block, or whether it's doing something else to actually contribute to the story. Maybe it's write a separate scene or something. You know, write every day. And now, keep in mind, that is on the Nano schedule where you only have 30 days to write 50,000 words.
But that's a good tip for everyone. I think there's a lot of people, and I wish I was one of these people, who get up, they work out, they take a shower, they sit down and write. And that's their schedule at the beginning of the day.
I don't know how many writers actually work out in the morning, but the point remains that scheduling time
get one of those finger treadmills. And you just
scheduling time out of your day. And making it regular enough, because this is important to you.
I mean, hopefully it's your job. I mean, no, it could be a really good hobby. I mean, I don't think every listener here, I don't know if they want to make it their job.
I don't think they'd want to listen to this podcast if they didn't like writing. But anyway.
And also, here's the thing about writing. It doesn't pay well. It better not be your only job.
Unless you actually have books published and you're getting royalty fees.
We don't, well, even then, we're not all J.K. Rowling.
You're correct.
Is it Rowling?
J.K. Rowling.
Okay, good. That W's confusing.
Well, it's British. But
it's
anyway,
like bowling. It's
like
not
British.
bowling.
But anyway, the last one here, and this is not really much of a tip, but it's deadlines, you know. And deadlines exist in your work life, in your school life, so why not give yourself a bit of a deadline for your writing life? I'm going to have chapter 3 done by such and such date. I'm going to have this many words by whatever a date. I'm going to write how many words this week. And use that to hold yourself to it.
And find a way to make that deadline appealing to you. Like, if you're like me and you like a bunch of junk food, say, okay, I'm going to get this particular junk food only if I finish the chapter by this point in time. I need to do that. I actually don't do that. I'm going to start doing that.
If you watch a ton of tokusatsu, which I mentioned earlier, I limited myself to only a couple episodes of tokusatsu during the days of November unless I had reached a certain word count for the day.
Right.
And if I broke it, fantastic. It's a bit of a reward. But if I didn't focus, then I wasn't going to overdo it on something that would waste more time.
Right.
And I kept myself to that deadline. In several years past I've done Nano, I managed to get 50,000 words usually halfway through the month. Partly because I'm so naturally verbose. Partly because I'm so naturally verbose, but also because I stay focused on writing when it's writing time.
Right.
And that's the thing that really helps me. Now, again,
that's why your Facebook posts are like
50,000
words themselves.
Not my quality work, but, that's what editing's for. However, when you continue a book and you don't have writer's block, you also need to think about where you're going, the destination.
And like I said before, sometimes it helps for me, like this I did it before, is plan the beginning, plan the end, do whatever you want in the middle. But even then, when you're in the middle, you gotta figure out how do I get to this point, even if I'm writing on the seat of pants, how do I get to the end I have planned?
Particularly the climax, being the most important scene in your book, should probably have a decent amount of lead-in, have a decent amount of
build up
and planning for it, right?
Right.
So how do you get there? I'll leave it to the more experienced author to talk about that.
How I get there, I mean, my climaxes are generally pretty ridiculous. Like, they're huge, they're huge, that's all I got. They're pretty ridiculous and they're huge. And a lot of people usually die. I have yet to write a story where a lot of people don't usually die. But,
shoot for that one next time.
I'll write a romance novel and only one person will die. And it'll be the mother, and the couple will be totally fine. Plot twist. Anyways,
spoilers.
Oh God, you're right. Oh man, I guess I can't write it now.
Spoilers for your new
I guess I can't write
book.
it. I can't write it now. I have to stick to action novels.
No, but
anyways, so I like to build up to why is this so crazy? Like, what has happened? What advantage have the bad guys or the good guys, usually the bad guys, have had that made them get this crazy and kill this many people?
Why are the stakes this high?
Why are the stakes this high? Yeah, like what happened? Sure. And that's a way for me to get into the climax. Now, the way to stop it, usually, look, I'll be honest, often if the bad guys are really unstoppable and they have a lot of crazy stuff going on, you're going to have to cheat your way to victory. There's going to be something where you press a button, even though the button itself is hard to get to, and then it's over.
Because all bases are rigged to explode the same way.
Right.
All secret bases are rigged to explode the same way. You push one button, it all blows up.
Every villain has their self-destruct button. Every Death Star has their hole that you fire in.
Every Death Star has that one exhaust tube that they didn't
Every
seal.
Chitauri invasion has the ship that you blow up and they all fall down.
Oh, yeah, well, sure. Anyway.
But the point is, you gotta figure out how to build up to that, but at the same time, do it organically.
Right.
Don't make it seem forced, and make it earned. Like, the final part should be your character overcoming amazing odds, but at the same time doing it in a way that feels like they could.
And a shout out to one of our friends in more real life than this podcast, but you have to make it doable.
Right.
I remember this gentleman had a ship design that he was trying to beat, and we're just trying to rack our brain trying to find a way to actually make this believable, beatable.
Mm-hmm.
And so it took us a while. So you may have to be, shall we say flexible, but certainly don't make it so impossible that it couldn't be solved.
Or if it is impossible, don't make it so the hero suddenly gets some sort of magic ability to
either a MacGuffin or Deus Ex Machina,
or just them being a Mary Sue, where
they just
never
magically
wielded a
solve
sword
everything.
in their life, and then they're suddenly an expert at it.
Oh look! Suddenly Excalibur comes out of the stone for me, and it just happens to fit right there.
Oh look! I've never wielded a lightsaber before, and I've taken down this guy, First Order. I really didn't like Star Wars: The Force Awakens. Have I said that before?
Not.
God, I did not like that movie.
All right,
I think people are turning on it finally after a year and a half.
Well,
I mean, some people.
All right,
but
anyways,
the hate-dom is getting more vocal.
You realize that the climax, of course, is the biggest piece, but you know there's more than just the climax for a destination. Mm-hmm. Right, Donald?
Yes, because once it's all over, there's still a little bit of writing to do. I mean, I guess it depends on the story.
Right.
But this is what the French call the denouement. Well, I don't think it's denouement, it's just denouement.
Denouement.
Dim French.
Yeah,
rendezvous and on roads.
Rendezvous and
in routes.
Anyways. Or in English, the denouement.
Right. So, I think it might be... No, you're right. Okay. The denouement. This is the part where... Also called the falling action.
Right.
The story is over, the conflict is over, and now we're just wrapping up loose ends.
Or pursuing more for sequel hooks.
Right. But in terms of sequel hooks, don't make it too obvious. Or if you do, don't make it seem forced. Like the villain suddenly pops out of the rubble. It's like, I will get my revenge! To be continued in The Villain's Revenge. Revenge of the Villain.
Revenge of the Villain, part 17,802.
I thought that villain died. Yeah, that's why he wants revenge.
Exactly. Well, he and all the others.
Anyways, but in terms of me, and it varies from person to person. For me, the denouement, or however the hell you pronounce it, is by far the easiest part for me to write.
This writes itself.
Right, like, by that point as well, figure out where you've gone because you've pretty much already gone there.
Sure.
You know who the characters are, you just say about what's happened, but also for me, I'm excited to finish the book. I'm excited to get that feeling of accomplishment of, I finished this.
But there are some people who are kind of like, I don't want to let go of this because now after that it's over.
Right.
You know, and so that does exist too.
Well, maybe the thing is I always plan series and I never usually finish them. So I've only written the last book of a series a few times.
Fair enough.
That one, well, no, even then I finished that pretty quickly.
Well, I'm trying to think of the was it the one that you wanted to take into 3 that you aborted at 2?
And guess what? I finished that one pretty quickly, too.
But it wasn't the final book at the time, is what I'm saying.
But, no.
Anyway.
But I didn't plan for that until I really want to continue this. Oh, wait, no, that was a bad idea.
You're welcome. But anyways.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So, you know, it isn't terribly difficult so long as you have some idea. I mean, Donald said knowing where they want them to go. And so here's my tip for the destination, the denouement, or the end action. Have an outline of the conclusion before you write the climax. So you can see what the climax is going to come out to be, but you don't have to execute it exactly.
Right.
It's kind of that loose framework thing again. Obviously, if you railroad yourself into something, it might not work out the way you thought it would if you have some free reign in the middle of the climax, right? So as long as you know where the characters end up, where you want them to go, that outline of the conclusion, then you can do whatever you want within the climax, and maybe it changes the conclusion, and that's totally okay.
Right.
But you want to have some concept before you get to the end, and you're just like, oh, what the heck do I do?
Right, exactly.
One of my more notable fanfics, not because you'll ever actually see it for listeners, but
maybe they will. Don't ever sell yourself short.
Yeah, well, I have one of my fanfictions based on Power Rangers. It's the original characters, the original powers, and there was this character who was going to become a ranger, and after, I mean, obviously this isn't really the conclusion part, but I just, spending more time thinking about it, I knew exactly what I wanted him to do, but then I didn't. And I changed my mind. Mm-hmm. And now I have a much better idea for not only what to do with the character, but also what to change the story to how to make that work. And so, you know, that's kind of the idea I have in mind here. Now, again, that works at any point of the story, but particularly for a conclusion.
Right, exactly. And, like, what I was saying about, like, something like a Deus Ex Machina or something where, like, something comes out of nowhere to save the day. That's never a good thing, but people forgive it the least in the climax, because that's the most important part. So you want to make sure you know how the climax is going to end even especially before you get to the climax. Like, how is it all going to be resolved, like you were saying, before you write the climax? That way you can write a natural conclusion to the climax, because it's the most important part. So if you write something that, like, seems to come out of nowhere to save the day, people are usually... It depends, I guess, but people are usually the least forgiving for it.
And depending on how well you set up the things in the climax, too, you could have, like, they call it a brick joke, where something kind of disappears for a while, but then you bring it back in the climax and it actually has use.
Right. Or, you know, depending on how good of a writer or filmmaker or whatever you are, it can work. Like, an example I bring up here, and probably the most famous example, is Jurassic Park. There is no way in hell that T-Rex should have come back at the end to eat the raptor right when it was about to jump in on him. But people really like the T-Rex. It's a really cool idea. People will forgive it. It's in this point, it's a Deus Rex Machina.
Oh, so clever with the puns.
And also, people are like, oh, how to get in the building? You can see. I mean, I know you're distracted by the awesome raptor, T-Rex shaking the Rex
action,
but there's a big opening in the wall behind him. Clearly, he broke through there. And
Sure.
yeah, they're like, oh, but what about the thumping, like the water rippling? Like, how'd that happen? You know what? Their own hearts are probably thumping louder than that. They probably didn't hear it.
That's fair.
So it depends on how you do it. Like, what I just told you, that's the exception. That's not the rule. That doesn't mean you should try and go for that. Unless you're really good.
And again,
most of us aren't Steven Spielberg.
And again, this is one of those fly by the seat of your pants, or do you plot at events? Because obviously, the things that you want to use in the climax need some explanation. Hopefully, before the climax, am I right?
Right, exactly.
And so, if you manage to seed those moments early on and bring them back, it's not only more rewarding for the reader, but it also doesn't come completely out of left field.
Right.
Thus, avoiding Deus Rex Machina.
Or any other kind of ex machinas.
Or any ex machina, because X's are so great.
Deus Ex Machina. No, I'm not.
No, let's not go there. But anyway,
this character's revealed to be male instead of female. There, it doesn't have to be about.
Yeah, well, sure.
It could be about gender.
Right.
But how's that save the day?
I don't know. Suddenly, not having a certain pair.
This
of
plot
organs.
ninja, I think, is going nowhere.
We're pulling the plug on this joke. Anyway, you know. But once you manage to get that done, once you finally manage to overcome all the writer's block and you had this destination in mind and you got through all the way to the end and you have your draft complete, then what happens, Mr. Close to Published?
You edit. You edit the hell out of it. Because it's probably not good. Let's be blunt.
Let's be blunt. Your best work
And guess
from
what?
that day might not be your best work anymore.
And guess what? That is totally okay.
That's the point.
Yes, you got the whole book done, like, in terms of the draft. That's the hard part. Who cares that it's crap now? That's what editing is for.
Your polite golf claps for finishing your draft.
Hopefully this doesn't wreck our microphone. Okay, I'm not seeing the things jump up too much, so I think we'll be okay.
Anyways, the point is that editing is okay. Editing is it's even encouraged, right?
I think it's required to be encouraged. Or just... Wait.
Required to be encouraged? Maybe just required.
It's required for us to encourage it, and it's also required.
It's also required, okay.
If your book is not edited, then people will notice.
So here's the thing with editing, and this is something worth keeping in mind. Another pair of eyes is always a good thing to have. Doesn't mean you can't do your own edits in some respect, because like I catch typos in my works all the time and whatnot just by going back over it. But another pair of eyes will always be welcomed, even if it's somebody who's just going to pan it and say, wow, you really could have done that better. You know, it's something.
And actually, that would be better, though, than having just a yes man. Like, this is great, don't change it. Like,
to be fair, it's better to have the yes man and constructive criticism, or constructive
a
criticism,
mix.
than the guy who simply says, this is shit. Now moving on.
Yeah, I'm just, oh, you know that copy you gave me, the manuscript? I used it as toilet paper.
You know that the manuscript that you gave me, I didn't feel like recycling, so I burned it because it was that much garbage. You know?
I had to throw away my glasses because I didn't want to have the possibility of seeing it again.
Ever again.
Oh.
But, you know, you need to get some people that will give you some honest feedback. And I usually find that my friends are the best thing. Because I tell them from the start, I'm not asking you to like this. I want your opinion, your honest opinion. What can I do better?
And also, it's good for your self-esteem, too, in case you think something is bad or something is obvious. They haven't read it before. Like, unless you've told it to them. Like, but...
Well, they don't have the
story.
familiarity.
If something seems obvious to you, That's because, like, in terms of a plot twist or something seems terrible to you because you're like, oh, that's amateurish. It's because you've read it 1,000 times.
Oh, God, I telegraphed that move. Oh, God, that MacGuffin came out of nowhere. Well, maybe.
Like, it's because you've read this book 1,000 times, you thought about it 1,000 times. This person has only read it this time.
You've put so much time and effort into it that they cannot replicate instantly. Therefore, they have a fresh perspective on something that you just kind of gotten past or grown accustomed to.
Which can be both good for your work and bad for your work. Sometimes they'll catch something that you didn't catch.
Absolutely. And that's why any other pair of eyes you can get is a good one. Obviously,
but they might be like, oh wow, this culture you've created, that's supposed to be good. There's a really striking parallel to Nazis here. And like, oh crap, you're right, I didn't notice that before. I gotta rework this entire story.
Now question how far you let those fixes affect you. And I believe the case is that when you have a professional edit job, that they solicit your feedback on their edits, unless it's just like simple typos and stuff. And so if they're suggesting a story change, they vet it by the author first, because obviously it's your story.
And here's the thing, I used to be really scared of editors, like professional ones, because I didn't want them to change too much. Like, I liked the way my story is.
Well, sure.
Here's a tip. Professional editors generally just change how things are worded and how scenes are changed. They don't care about the plot because that's yours. Publishers are the ones that care about the plot because they're the ones that decide, does this sell, does this not sell, or whatever.
And yield to their experience.
Yes, absolutely. Or, be like me and self-publish because you don't give a crap what publishers think. And you think you're better than them. Failure. And this is not going to backfire you.
Well, we are better than you. So
we're better than you, publishers. Hey, Knopf, are you listening?
Anyways.
Scholastic, I know you're out there.
Yeah, sure. But anyways, the point is...
Also, Scholastic, if you are listening, I would love to work with you someday. This is all done in the name of comedy.
Sure, try and sweet talk it now and getting back in their good graces. But... when you have that moment that they take over it, don't be afraid of that. Mm-hmm. They're trying to help you.
Right.
It's not about becoming an ego trip for the editor because they get the credit on the book. No, it's your book.
Right, exactly. So, yes. And, yep, I think...
You the tip or two?
Oh, yeah, a tip or two. I'm going to edit this out. And here's the thing as well. If your plot goes in a direction you didn't plan at first, like me with the Psy Squad or some other stuff, don't be afraid to fix earlier scenes. If your plot goes in a direction you didn't change at first. And of course, this is pretty obvious when you finish the draft, but even when you're working on it.
Right.
Like when I was working on this draft of Megazoic, there are things I added at the beginning to like sort of build on what I was doing before, what I was doing later, because I had different plans when I started out, and I was like, oh, this doesn't work, or oh, I expanded on this more, so I probably should make it more prevalent at the beginning here so people know it's important.
Well, and the other part of that, too, is that as you go through, theoretically, your writing is getting better. And so you want to be able to reflect so it's consistently your best work throughout. Right. But how do you do that without taking too much time? That's kind of my concern with that approach. However, I also have a tip for this thing. In a lot of these stories, especially in our first and second, maybe even fifth drafts, we have scenes that we really love. We love them so much, we're trying to shoehorn them in, and sometimes it just doesn't work.
Right,
but here's my tip. Even if you won't use the scene, if you really love it, keep it. I mean, put it in a separate document. Don't try and shoehorn it into the story flow. But if you really like how you wrote that, why not keep it?
Right.
It's a memento of what you really enjoyed, and even if it doesn't fit your story, it shows what you've done.
And it can inspire you for ideas later. Maybe you can fit it in later. Maybe not the scene itself.
Recycling ideas.
Yes, I'm all for that. Now, if you'll excuse me,
if you'll excuse me, actually reclaim all his old documents.
I'm going to replace my Prius with a Tesla Roadster, because I have the money for it, obviously.
We're rolling in the dough from our listener subscribers. Thank you for your support.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm going to go sleep in my money bed. I'm going to go dive in my money bin, Scrooge McDuck style.
Thanks, Scrooge.
By the way, that doesn't work, by the way.
Better get the bulldozer so you can make it more like a pool rather than just a pile of gold.
Here's the thing about coins. You can't swim in it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to break your nostalgia. But
it's Disney.
It's solid. You can't swim through it. Even if there's a bunch of them, it's hard.
Well, gold is surprisingly heavy, especially in bullion form, Sean.
Right. Did you know that Scrooge McDuck's money bin is actually just his physical change. Like that's not even all he has. It's like a third of what he has.
That wouldn't be surprising. He's got a bank account full in the Duckburg. Is it Duckburg for Scrooge McDuck? I can't remember.
It's just the show that DuckTales.
The
city
show
that
is-
DuckTales sits in.
Right, but I think it's Duckburg. Because trying to remember the
I
name.
don't remember, but I do know
Anyway.
that some adamant DuckTales fans
Well, be
have
correcting
figured
us.
out that if that money bin were real, based on the human, if you compare the ducks to a human size, that money bin would have to hold 2/3 of the world's gold. Well done, Scrooge McDuck.
Fantastic. Here you're
We're right behind you. We're getting very close with our podcasting.
Thank you to
followers.
listener subscribers. Anyway,
I think that'll wrap it up. I gotta go.
any other final thoughts before we close it out today?
I need to watch DuckTales.
Don't get the song set. No, that's not
I hear there's
possible.
a reboot coming out next
That's
year.
not possible. You'll get the theme song.
I'm
stuck
not going
in
to bring
your
it
head.
up because
Yeah, please don't.
there's a reboot coming out next year.
Really?
On Disney XD.
For DuckTales?
Woohoo! Oh, I did it! Oh no!
Oh dear God! Here we go.
Oh, we better end it.
Final thoughts for with this whole thing. Obviously, these are our tips. Sometimes they'll work for you, sometimes they won't. But hey, we'd love to hear from you if you have things that really work for you, and maybe we can share it on a future podcast. We'd love to do that. That'd be awesome.
I think we should bring this up. Where can people find us? Like
Well, maybe we should point them to your website that these are published at.
That isn't finished yet, or maybe point them.
But
to
by
my
the time that this is done, your professional website creator will have it done.
Maybe I should give
Mr.
him my-
Rolling in money.
Maybe I should give him my email address. Wait, no, not enough.
No, that's
maybe I
almost
should give
private.
link to my professional Facebook account. Oh wait, I haven't done that either.
Oh,
Next episode, you'll know
Next
for
episode,
sure
you'll find out where to send all this feedback and stuff. But
As of now, tell us in person. If you don't know us in person, sucks to be you.
you can find us. Don't go CIA on us and track us down, please. That'd be horrible.
Well, I'm sure it's possible.
I'm sure it's possible, but do we really want them doing that? Anyway, if you have something that really works for you, or if you just want to share with us some of your ideas, because you know what, we like to give constructive criticism. Or at least I do.
I love constructive criticism. I love being an asshole.
Okay, well he calls it being an asshole.
Just criticism in general.
But I mean, before he had professional editors, he had me, and I'm not sure whether he's thanking me or cursing me for that. But regardless, I really enjoy doing that kind of stuff.
I don't know if I've told you this, but I'm gonna dedicate the book to you. Like totally honestly, I think
What?
I'm gonna put to Matt David. I mean, not really, but like whatever name.
The actual name, but we're
For editing thousands of words of my garbage for free. That's what I'm gonna put on there. You're welcome, buddy.
Oh, yes, and I'm sure I'll get so many royalties from that. See, I
On
don't
that
have a
part-
money bed to roll in.
Well, you can share mine for the night. And on that note, I'm Matthew Donald,
I'm Matt David.
and we'll see you, hopefully not in 9 months, maybe 8 this time.
That was the Writ Wit, where us two twits talked about writting. But remember, no matter what we say, no matter whether we claim we're not experts or not, we are better than you.
So long, folks.